All right, we back again. Hopefully, as I do this more often, I'm going to get just better at not trailing off too much and staying relatively on topic, but I make no promises or guarantees whatsoever. So I just kind of named this episode maybe something a bit more bombastic and kind of general compared to what the actual note here says. So it's like, at the time that I wrote this, all these green net zero energy movements to stop climate change. But how do they actually plan to make a transition that works? Isn't oil needed, or still isn't oil still needed in manufacturing green products? At the time that I wrote this, it was probably like, I haven't done full transparency. I haven't done extensive research into how. I haven't really done much research at all into how they claim to make the transition from all the fossil fuels to complete green energy. I know that I think Canada put out some sort of plan a while ago. I said on Twitter that I was, on one of my other Twitter accounts, that I was going to read through it, and recommended that other people read through it too. Maybe just to give the argument a fair shake. I still haven't read through it. Full transparency. I think it's in one of my tabs somewhere, open in Brave somewhere. But regardless, just for the sake of, conversation, I'll just ramble a little bit about just the concepts here, because you could obviously there's probably a way that you could do this that would work. There would have to be, if you think on a long enough time frame around reasonable policies and actually practical solutions. But maybe the main problem right now, and you don't even necessarily have to do any research to at least humor this side of the argument, is that when you have people, whether it's like Greta Thunberg or AOC, any of these people out there that are talking about climate change stuff, it's usually kind of like, it's called climate alarmism, probably for a reason. And so when you have people that, I don't know if they've actually said this, but if they've said we need, if Greta actually has said this, that we need to stop all fossil fuel production now, it's that kind of stuff that you don't even have to do research to kind of realize that, how would you do that? I think whenever I talk to, or not whenever I talk to people, but I've used this example in the past when talking to somebody, where it's if you did that, as far as I understand, Haiti runs on diesel, the country of Haiti, Haiti's got a lot of problems right now beyond just running on only or mainly diesel, but regardless, the gang stuff is a whole other thing. Maybe it'll be an episode into itself, but I don't know if I would need to do more research into that. But anyway, barbecue. Anyway, it's as much as we might laugh about some elements of the ridiculousness of the situation, it's probably terrible, scary, and sad. And I did some missions in Haiti a while ago, not military stuff, church missions, right? I went down there for 2 weeks, and so it's when stuff happens in Haiti, I think it hits home, or it impacts me a bit more than just hearing about some random place in Africa, because I actually have some experience there, and so when you get to know people, when you live there for a short period of time, it might kind of stick with you in a different way. But regardless, for this kind of climate alarmism stuff, when they're if they ever say stuff we need to stop all the fossil fuels now, right? It's so first of all, how? Do you literally mean just dead stop? Or are we going to transition into something? But usually, I get the vibe that all their timelines are super expedited. When are they ever saying we're going to have a 50-year plan? Usually the only 50-year plan or thing that they propose that's over a 50-year period is that, I guess we'll all be dead in 50 years if we don't stop fossil fuels very, very soon, or something like that. I could be misrepresenting the argument a bit, but if we're just thinking about what you would hear from the average climate alarmist or whatever, the air quotes might not even be warranted there, because it might just legit be alarmism, right? Just kind of blown out of proportion and maybe just unreasonable. I think that the main thing is the argument that they present even reasonable, right? And when you have countries like Haiti that run on diesel, even Western countries, to varying levels, you still got, I still have on the screen here from last episode, just West Virginia, one state, right? in the U.S. Like, maybe there's other states that compare in percentages. I don't know. 94% coal-powered grid, and Kentucky 75% coal-powered grid. If you get rid of all fossil fuels, West Virginia's having a bad time. You know what I mean? Like, what is the 6% of not coal, right? They got some solar panels in somebody's backyard. That'd probably be a pretty big backyard if it's 6%. Anyway, so, just on those merits, if you have anything that's in a crazy fast-paced plan, probably not practical. So what is the actual solution? I think that if you wanted to look to somebody who would actually be able to make a transition for a country from fossil fuel to not fossil fuel, I'll just say it that way, just because, like, you could talk about electric in terms of, like, solar, wind. I kind of got maybe a little bit of beef that, like, nobody talks about hydroelectric, and, like, I think I've heard the counter argument, oh, well, you know, it destroys the habitats, and it's like, well, can't you make fish ladders? Like, or that's a thing, right? Is there any way to make these dams without destroying the wildlife? Like, it's like, that's such a quick conclusion to come to make it sound like it wouldn't be practical. But it's like, Hoover Dam's been there a while. You got like a natural attraction that has been birthed out of that, like Lake Mead, I believe it's called, which I think was having some issues with, like, record low water levels in, like, I don't know if it was 2022 or a bit earlier than that. But regardless, you got a lake there now, which, you know, could have some industry, like vacation industry, tourism industry, or whatever. And then if you build the fish ladders or whatever you do, make the dam reasonable for wildlife as best as you can. And then, like, Hoover Dam's still going, and it's, like, quite the structure. So, and again, not that dams would be enough, but it's something, and I think, like, at least give it the credit that it's due. But it seems like people, it just feels like people don't bring up hydroelectric very often at all. So that's a personal thing, that, like, you know, why aren't you giving some credit there? Everybody always goes to wind and solar. Now, Elon seemed to give the impression, I think it was on another Joe Rogan episode some time ago, that you would need, I think, what did he say, a portion of Ohio? I don't know if it was, I could be wrong about it being Ohio, but it was like a portion of a certain state that you just turn into solar farm, and that would be enough to power, I think, the whole United States. I don't know if that's true, because if it is that true, why aren't they just doing it? You see, this is the thing, like, if I'm gonna not go on any, like, specific research points here, because I'm just kind of going off on my notes here, and just thought process, you know? If it was that easy, then why wouldn't they just do it? It's almost kind of like at the beginning of COVID, with how quickly I saw Canada respond and, like, print money and do stuff or whatever we did. Like, how quick the response was. I think I kind of got this realization, and I could be wrong, but at the time I think this is what it felt like. If they really cared about the problems, they would already be fixed, or they would already be solved. So then I guess the conclusion is that the other stuff that wasn't fixed, they just, like, didn't care about that much, possibly. You know, because look at how quickly they moved on the whole COVID thing. But, you know, are there still reserves that don't have clean water? I've heard about that as like a talking point or whatever before. I don't know if that's true or not, that some reserves don't have clean water or not. I could be wrong. If they all have clean water, that would be great. If everywhere has clean water in Canada, that would be great. I don't know if that's true. Regardless, like, if that is an example that holds water, I don't know if I should take back that joke, because maybe that's a big deal for some people in terms of it being like a hardship. If it is, then that sucks. Hopefully there's some sort of other filtration or stuff that could be done to remedy the issue. But if the government really cared about fixing those problems, would they be fixed? You know, like, just ask yourself that. So when it comes to things like, you know, we'll pivot back to the whole climate agenda here. To what degree is oil needed for manufacturing? Probably a decent amount. Even, like, when you just think about the transportation of goods, it's a lot of gas, probably. When you think about Yeah, and manufacturing green products. I think what I might have meant, possibly, I wrote this a while ago, so I could be wrong here. Put green in air quotes, right? And manufacturing green products. I've heard that the EV batteries can't be recycled. We're going to go to the internet real quick. Okay, so that might have been either not true, or maybe they've gotten better at recycling them. The battery's critical metals such as lithium, cobalt, magnesium, nickel, and aluminum are viable and infinitely recyclable. Recycling EV batteries can reduce carbon emissions associated with mining. Okay, so if that's the case, cool. That's good. So I kind of have to maybe eat my words on that one, even though it was just something that I heard. But regardless, it's good to have the stuff in front of you. Okay, so if the batteries are recyclable, but still, the factories that produce the batteries, what do they run on? Right? That's worth noting. So if the factories run on fossil fuels that make the EV batteries, we have a bit of a interesting kind of dynamic here. So, with all that said, even the green stuff may, in many cases, require fossil fuels. Probably does at some point down the line, whether it's in like the shipment of the batteries, the manufacturing of the batteries, at the recycle plants for the batteries. I assume that fossil fuels are probably used to some degree at all those places. That's probably a safe assumption. So how, like, it would be, this might be the interesting way to sum it up, is that if you had these different proponents, or people who are proponents of this kind of like climate alarmism, like we gotta stop climate change now. If you had them like on like a Senate floor and you question them and you say how, like, and you don't just take we need to do it like yesterday as an answer, but if you say, okay, like, what's your step-by-step plan? And it might be interesting to see how many people would actually have a thorough plan for how to transition from fossil fuels to electric. One of the few people that I think could actually detail the process would be Elon, but he would probably admit like the tremendous undertaking it would be to like completely refit all the different industries with non-fossil fuel tools, equipment, buildings, systems, etc., right? Like all the places can't be heated by gas. They have to be heated by something else. They can't, like, the vehicles all have to be electric. They can't be gas. Like, you know, all this different stuff like has to change at every level, right? So it's like, how can that not be like a 20-year plan? Like, depending on, even like if you're looking at smaller areas, like for the delivery in my small town here, like, is it reasonable to think that Toronto would be able to better adapt to going completely electric than some small town out in the boonies somewhere, right? So you even, like, in terms of wide mass adoption, like, you know, we're only maybe about to get fiber optic internet in my town, like now, like we don't even have it right now, right? And this shouldn't be like a woe is me kind of thing, or whatever, because like we still have internet, you know what I mean? Like, but how often or how long has fiber optic been available for, versus when does it actually get applied to every place in a given country? We'll just go back to the interwebs. That didn't spell optic right. Because my grandma said that New Brunswick got fiber optic like a while ago. Dude. Okay, based on provided search results, or at least a certain part of New Brunswick got fiber optic like a while ago. I don't know if it was 2000s. Could be wrong on the date there. Based on provided search results, here's a summary of the development and deployment of fiber optic internet in Canada. So the University of Guelph, in collaboration with other Canadian universities, established a network called Net North in the 1980s, which connected universities across Canada using fiber optic cables. Dude, They've been going at it since the 80s, dude. Guelph, man. A former coworker of mine used to live in Guelph. This was this was a precursor to modern fiber optic internet infrastructure. So maybe was that fiber optic as good and as fast? Like, you wouldn't even have things that would be able to, I think, utilize the speed at the time. I don't know, maybe. You could surf the actual web super fast in the 80s. You would have been like the coolest guy. Probably not, but limited availability until the mid-2010s. Fiber optic internet was primarily available in urban areas with limited coverage in rural regions. Bam! You see, this is what I'm talking about. We still don't have it where I live. We're about to get it, I think. Like, they're cutting back the highway and putting in poles, which I assume is for the fiber optic cabling. Could be wrong, but I think we're supposed to get it kind of soon, maybe. Probably next year. Hopefully, maybe. This was due to lack of infrastructure and high costs associated with building and maintaining fiber optic networks. If it's that hard just to give people faster internet, how hard is it to get rid of all gas? Like, this probably helps my point that much more. We're just talking about internet, and not even internet as a concept, like as like a connect. You have the internet, you have connectivity to the internet. We're talking about just giving people a faster version of that, and my town still doesn't have it, and it started with limited availability in the 2010s. We're talking 14 years and counting, right? Or almost 14 years and counting. Or no, until the mid-2010s, my bad. So we're talking maybe almost 10 years. You know, if you ballpark at 2015, we're almost done 2024, so like, 9-10 years plus, we'll see. So anyway, just faster internet, not even internet, but just trying to get faster internet. So now, like, talk about like getting rid of everything gas, everything coal, everything diesel, everything oil, right? All of it. Getting rid of all of it everywhere. If it just takes this long to get faster internet everywhere, then dude, like, let's multiply this by 3, 4, 5 times. So let's go like a 30 to 50 year transition period. Who in the green agenda is talking like that? I'm going to take a wild guess and say nobody. Not a wild guess, but probably nobody. I have not heard anyone. Correct me, please. That would be like the one reasonable, like, climate alarmist person. Be like, well, it's a big deal, but like, well, probably take 50 years to get there. Like, nobody, like, that probably doesn't make good TV. So, yeah. And also, like, my dad just sent me something on LinkedIn earlier today where there was, like, I think it was some sort of climate summit or something like that, where because another thing that I guess the green movement people or the climate alarmist people talk about is like cow farts. Now, this post talked about burps as well. I haven't heard about the burps argument, but the cow farts, I've heard about that. Now, the idea with the methane, that would be a contributing factor to the climate change issue or whatever. Elon says it's not, or maybe not even close, I don't know, something like that. But regardless, the green people will claim that it's an issue, probably. And yet at this climate summit, they have these different, like, buffet bars. And there's a vegan one, and then there's like a meat one, or maybe there's multiple meat ones. Maybe there's multiple vegan ones. Regardless, there's a big crowd in front of the meat stuff. And then the guy takes his phone camera, goes over to the vegan side. There's like 4 people in line, right? So, like, there's saying something and then there's doing something. And when those two things don't match up, when it's the do as I say, not as I do, you're probably going to lose a lot of credibility, And is it true that Obama bought beachfront property semi-recently? Let me go to the interwebs. Okay, probably in Martha's Vineyard. Okay, Barack Obama and his family purchased a beachfront property in Hawaii near where he grew up in late 2021. The property is a large mansion situated on the island of Oahu. So that's what Cider AI says. President Obama was going to say Martha's Vineyard. So I don't really trust Snopes, but like, okay, even Snopes says it's true. So if even Snopes says it's true, then maybe it's true. Or then it probably is. Multiply until let's go. Okay, 2019, TMZ first reported that former U.S. President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama were locking down an incredible Martha's Vineyard estate. The gossip website cited several local sources reporting that the Obamas were in escrow. What does that mean? Explain. Refers to a financial arrangement where a third party temporarily holds funds or documents related to a property transaction until certain conditions are met. Well, there you go. For a vineyard property currently owned by Boston Celtics owner, is that Weiss Grosbeck? Renting the house this summer and loved it so much we've learned that they made an offer. The property's listed at a modest sub 15 million. Our sources say they're paying less. It's a pretty penny. So how they're paying less, but we don't know how much. Okay. Regardless, probably a decent chunk of change. The details of potential sale were not made public at the time, as TMZ reported. So probably the property in question. I'm spending way too much time reading through this. I kind of want to just confirm that so the deed. In August 2021, however, news coverage of plans Obama's 60th birthday made clear he is the owner of the property. As such, the claim is true. Okay, so as of 2020, so when he bought it is not necessarily the issue. As long as it is recent, it kind of proves the point, because this climate alarmism thing has probably been going on for a bit now. So if he, especially like 2020 onward, because 2020 onward is like, just like the craziness just kind of kicked it into overdrive, right? So if you have all this climate alarmism and stuff, then if the climate is changing and, things are supposedly getting warmer and supposedly ice caps melting or, whatever people say, then why are you buying beachfront property? Where Barack Obama will host his 60th birthday. That's kind of close. Unless you, on a high cliff or something. My fellow Americans, I have bought a beachfront property, okay? So Snopes says it's true. Purchased 50 million waterfront mansion. Okay, so regardless, if the sea levels are supposedly going to rise, why are you buying beachfront property? I digress. So how much do they believe their own rhetoric, right? And so if it's like, is it all just a grift for money, right? Kind of like the whole race baiting stuff, everything else, all the woke, different topics, pick a flavor of the month. If it's just a grift for money or attention, fame, government action, whatever, like, if it's just about that, then it might make sense. We're trying to virtue signal, right? Trying to look so great. If it's about that, then it would make sense why people would say one thing and do another if it is a grift. But there might be some true believers out there that really want to make that difference and try to make change happen. The only thing is, it's like, this is the bummer about all this stuff, is it kind of makes maybe a reactionary thing from everybody else, because like they see the craziness and they're like maybe they go in the opposite direction now, and now you've kind of like muddied the waters for reasonable interaction around the topic potentially. Because if people push really hard for something that's crazy, then people just might not want to talk about or humor the argument at all anymore, potentially. And then all of a sudden now, like, you may have hurt like practical action and like ruined other potentially good things. So if you would have just started on a reasonable note and been like, yo, let's go on a 50-year plan and try to slowly incorporate different things to try and make reasonable changes. Try to, like, let's start with making the delivery vehicles electric. You know what I mean? Like, just if you just had like actually reliable, solid, good, electric or hydrogen powered, 18-wheelers, how much are you going to make a difference in the emissions just by, changing just the transportation industry? And then from there, if you could move on to the airline industry. But at the same time, isn't there an argument to be made for, is it the greenhouse effect? To the interwebs again. Okay. Get the spelling right. What is the greenhouse effect? Heard about this back in like high school, I think. So the greenhouse effect is a natural process that occurs when certain gases in the Earth's atmosphere, known as greenhouse gases, trap heat from the sun, warming the planet. Okay, so this is probably what they would claim is the problem. Now let's go to, what is carbon shielding? I don't know if this is actually what it's called, but it's the idea that certain levels of emissions will actually reflect solar radiation or solar rays. What is it called when carbon emissions reflect the sun? Gotta put typing skills to work here. Based on the prior search results, there's no specific term or concept that directly describes carbon emissions reflecting the sun. Okay. Let me rephrase it differently. Not chemtrails, but is it contrails? What's it called? Okay, contrails can reflect sunlight, but the extent of this reflection depends on various factors. Cooling effect. Contrails reflect solar light back to space, contributing to a cooling effect on the Earth's surface. So one of the things that I've heard about is that apparently after 9/11, directly after, when they grounded all the flights in the States for, I don't know if it was 1 day to 3 days to 5 days to a week. I don't know what it was, but it was a certain number of days. Probably should just look this up. How long were there no flights after 9/11? Flights suspended. Okay, flights resumed 2 days after. Okay, so I've heard it said that during that time, the climate in America got cooler, measurably, like a few degrees cooler. Post 9/11 flight suspensions made American climate cooler. The suspension of commercial flights in the United States following 9/11 attacks provided a unique opportunity for scientists to study the effects of contrails, condensation trails. So that's what that means. So not carbon emissions per se, but maybe like, are contrails and carbon emissions the same thing? I don't know. Contrails are wispy clouds formed by the exhaust of jet engines, so it must have some. You'd think exhaust, so it must have some carbon. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think it'd be. That sounds like a safe bet. And they can trap heat and warm the. So, wispy clouds formed by the exhaust of jet engines, and they can trap heat and warm the planet. So, does it reflect or does it not reflect? This answer seems kind of confusing. Several studies analyzed the data from the 3-day period. So was it 2 days or was it 3 days? September 11th. Okay, because September 11th, 2/14. So maybe it was 3 days. You know, sometimes the AIs, they just might be a little bit, you know. When all commercial flights were grounded, the results showed that the average daily temperature range increased by about 1 degree during this period compared to the 3 days preceding and following the flight suspensions. The warming effect was most pronounced in populated regions. Okay, so this is, I was misinterpreting how I was reading it. So yes, so when there were no contrails, things got warmer, right? Which would imply that the contrails made it cooler. So, you know, the warming effect was most pronounced in populated regions where air traffic was normally densest. The increased DTR was attributed to the reduction in contrails, which normally contribute to cloud coverage and reduce the range of temperatures. Implications. So regardless, if this study finding is accurate, and the average daily temperature range increased by about 1 degree, you know, several studies analyzed the data from the 3-day period, okay, etc., etc. So if that is the case, if that is indeed true, then is it possible that if you did what these people are claiming we should do, which is, or as far as I assume they're claiming, which is to, like, stop it all, would that make it actually cooler, or would it make it warmer? And what percentage of atmospheric carbon is by humans and technology? Based on the president, here's some. Increase. Okay, and probably. How does cement production, biomass burning? Okay, I didn't know that cement production was a contributor. As it depends on the specific time frame and data sources. However, estimates suggest anthropogenic CO2 emissions account for approximately 20 to 35% of the total CO2 in the atmosphere based on the 2,400 gigatons. You've heard of gigachat, how about gigatons of CO2 emitted by human activity since 1850. Now, the only thing that might be confusing about this is that, so because here would make you think that just the average concentration went up by 50%. But after reading that other thing, it almost made it sound like it was just talking about the total emissions since that time. But those emissions, as far as I would understand, would not always stay in the atmosphere. Eventually, at some point, would be, absorbed by the plants, etc. And they do what they do. But I could be misreading that. But regardless, like an estimate of the total emissions, right? But that might be a different factor, a different statistic than this up here. So, okay, natural sources such as oceanic and terrestrial carbon cycles account for the remaining 65 to 80% of atmospheric CO2. So you see, some of it, like, do we have accurate numbers of the situation? Possibly. Or maybe it's estimates. Like, well, it is estimates here, right? Or, estimates suggest. Because, like, I get the vibe that it almost feels like a different kind of answer from here to here. But, because that's a pretty wide swing. 65 to 80% of atmospheric CO2 from natural sources. So wait, oceanic and terrestrial carbon cycles, does that include human? Like, it says natural sources, so I want to assume that it doesn't mean technology. So that doesn't really explain that much more. What are terrestrial carbon cycles? Strong biomass, okay. So based on what it's saying here, I don't think that the terrestrial carbon cycles are relating to, like, human technology. It might include humans in that, but that's more like, I would assume, us breathing and etc. So if that's the case, if it's 65 to 80% is from natural sources, then you'd think that that's not quite as sounding as bad as they'd make you think it would be. But still, if human technology contributes like the 20+% in the atmosphere, like, yeah, that's worth noting. But all of this said, with like getting the percentages, of like, okay, how much do humans contribute to the increase? With all that said, remember that carbon is plant food, right? Right? Carbon dioxide is plant food. So, because it seems like they always portray this as more carbon equals bad. And, like, I could be wrong at what the argument that they actually make is, but it may have felt at times like more carbon equals bad, kill the planet. It will kill the planet, right? Which you assume means like all the wildlife will die and stuff. And I believe that they also, like, they probably pin that on the increasing temperatures and that, the planet will not be able to adapt to those levels of increasing temperatures. But, like, before it just gets to increasing temperatures and everything just dying or whatever, if there's a lot of carbon, don't trees like that? Like, wouldn't that just be more food? Right? So, is it that bad? Now, if it was something that was actually like a toxic gas or whatever that killed things, you can make the argument then. But, like, carbon. And even, like, my dad's a geologist, so he comes from the perspective of, like, and I'll end this on this note here because this is, like, going on almost 40 minutes. From a geological perspective, which none of these climate alarmists, I don't think, ever talk about it from this perspective. And I could even say, like, I don't agree with, like, geological timelines on a personal belief level. But for the sake of the argument, I'll just say it like this. In the geological community, it would probably be relatively agreed upon that the climate has changed, and it's been changing, and it will continue to change. And then my dad would say something like, we're still coming out of the Ice Age, or he might say we're still coming out of the last Ice Age, whatever that school of thought would say. And, how true that is, you could debate that. but regardless, like if from a geological perspective, if the, commonly agreed upon belief there is that, climate change is kind of an inevitability and it will continue to happen. None of these, green movement people ever seem to talk like that. I don't know if any of them ever have been faced with that, because like, what do you say to that? Because the only thing you're arguing at that point, if you're going to try to be reasonable, is like, okay, well, in addition to the natural process of it always changing and it will continue to change and etc., we are like adding to that process. It's like, okay, you can make that argument. Like, okay, but how much are we adding to the process? And, we got some estimates here, but if you are going to make it seem like it is, if you're going to make it seem like it's because of humans that like everything's going to die in like whatever the timeline is by 2050 or whatever they say, if you're going to make that claim, like, I don't know if this argument's been made, maybe it has, I just haven't seen it. Probably should talk about like how much above the default amount have humans contributed to the process, and is that to like a point of such critical mass that it would cause this mass devastation? Because if it's like a, what is it, 20 to 35% increase is the assumed amount, right? If it's a 20 to 35% from like human technology, is that 20 to 35%, if I'm interpreting that correctly, and if that amount is accurate, is that level of contribution enough to cause like a tipping of the scales, and the changing that's already, if there's already change happening, is that enough added change to make it like unbearable, and like how would you prove that? How do you prove that? And you could watch different nature documentaries and they probably would make the claim that, I don't know if the coral bleaching or whatever, like, but even then it's like, I think as time goes on, we kind of realize that more and more things that we're fed are like not true or half-truths or something like that. So it's like, do I even know that I could believe that what that documentary was presenting about that specific coral reef was actually due to climate change? Or did something else happen? Was it near some sort of like, natural disaster? Was there another reason? Like, maybe what they're saying was accurate and true, but I don't know for sure. And now I'm kind of suspicious of stuff. So I'll leave that there. I think maybe the moral of the story here is, I'll say it this way, don't freak out, yeah, don't freak out, so, yeah, because hopefully it's not as bad as they make it sound. If it were as bad as they made it sound, or as they make it sound, would Obama have bought the beachfront property? Ask that question. So I'll leave that there. I think I more or less like beat that point to death verbally, and probably rabbit trailed along the way. Hopefully it was half decent and okay. I don't like, when I'm coming at these episode topics, I'm not like coming from a perspective of like a whole lot of preparation or research or anything like that. I'm just kind of going based off of what I know, what I've heard, what we kind of look up on the spot here. Just kind of like maybe semi-regular dude talking to semi-regular people, like just thinking out loud maybe. Because most people, like if you hear something, if somebody comes up to you in the street and says, hey, what do you think about this? You're probably going to respond in a semi-similar way of processing and thinking and explaining things. You're going to be probably going based off memory what you heard. And, you might be wrong. I might be wrong. We might all be wrong. But regardless, ask the questions. Ask the questions. Because during COVID, if I'm remembering correctly, the whole asking questions thing and doing your own research wasn't exactly very supported by the mainstream media. So maybe we should do more of that. We should probably do a lot more of that, of the asking of the questions.